Hey everybody, and welcome to Garden with Najet. I'll be your host, Najet. And today I wanted to go over a very special plant of mine, and that's going to be kale. So kale is actually going to be part of the brassica family. It's going to be very similar to mustard greens and cabbage. This crop can be grown in numerous climates depending on what zone you live in. So make sure to check out my 2024 brassica growing guide on my website at allthingsgirly.org. Or you can go onto the USDA website, figure out what zone you're in, and see when you kind of want to start planting your kale. But that's the basics of it. Let's get into it. So I do live down here in Georgia, down here in zone 8A, and I have grown kale for the past, I want to say 2 years. I started in the spring, followed it into summer, and now I'm doing it in fall and winter. And that is one of the greatest things about kale, is not only can you plant it at really any time of the year, but let me mention, it's winter time right now, right? So what does that mean? It means that we're getting frost every single night that we are down here in Georgia, and specifically Georgia's in the south. Let's think about any of those states that are up north. Y'all are gonna be experiencing frost right now. The greatest number one quality about kale is the fact that it can be frost resistant. So depending on where you live, kale can tend to withstand temperatures around 25 to 30 degrees at night for a certain extended period of time. So let's get into let's get into 4 different types of kale that you should be growing in your garden starting this spring. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. That way you can always come back for more gardening advice. Blue dwarf curly kale. It's known for its curly, fluffy, and crisp leaves, and this kale has minimal bitterness and tends to be more on the sweet side, especially when the temperature drops. It's really good raw or in salads and sandwiches, and as kale chips. Lacinato kale, also known as dino kale, this dark green kale with thick textured leaves is an amazing variety. I love the texture, and it's also amazing in soups, stews, and kale chips. In my opinion, this kale is less bitter and can be eaten raw. Red Russian kale and Premier kale. Both of them are huge flat-leaved kale that are thin, so when you do cook them, they can clump up. I like this in soups, stews, pestos, and sauces, and it's great for putting into fillings like arepas or pupusas. This one is Premier kale, and unfortunately I don't have any videos, but here's a picture of the very first kale leaf I picked last year. So let's get into how to grow kale specifically. So like I said, kale is one of those cooler weather crops that can technically be grown at any type of year, but it tends to enjoy cooler weather. So you typically want to start growing kale or start the germination process anywhere between July, depending on your zone, all the way into late September. During the spring is when kale can be replanted between anywhere from January to April, but we do want to keep in mind that kale does require a little bit more maintenance during the spring. During the spring with kale, several pests and fungal diseases can ruin your crop, so we want to keep an eye out for those. It's important to keep an eye out for any white eggs or spots on the underside of the leaf. And if you do see anything like that, immediately pick it off. In the springtime, we always want to be vigilant of what is on our plants. That way we can catch it early. Be on the lookout for these pests: aphids, cabbage worms, cabbage looper, flea beetles, cabbage aphids. There's all of these different things that you need to be aware of during the spring season. Kale does like a well-balanced fertilizer. It does not require as much nitrogen as other leafy greens. When you are picking a fertilizer, it's important to remember nitrogen creates very large, big leafy green leaves, whereas potassium and phosphorus develop more of a healthy root system. During the spring, you do want to keep an eye out for something called downy mildew on your kale plant. If you want to start growing kale in the spring, I would suggest starting 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. Even though I did say that kale can be frost resistant, the seedlings in the small little plant, it's going to get stunted if we try to do that outside. So I would suggest starting indoors at first, 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost in the spring. I usually start in late January, and then I continue to grow it inside, and then I transplant it out into the spring, early summer garden. Kale seeds are very small. They can be direct sown, but for beginners, I would suggest starting indoors and then transplanting once it's warmer. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it. I gave you guys the whole rundown about kale and how easy it is to grow. So let me know in the comments what kale you decided to grow this spring season, and I will see you guys next time. And don't forget to like and comment and share this with all of your fellow kale lovers. I'll see you next time. Bye. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.